brother, while telling me I'd always be a loser. 10 years later, he stood outside my office, holding bankruptcy papers, waiting for me to decide whether his company lived or died. My name is Ethan Walker. I was born into a family where success wasn't measured by character. It was measured by who Dad believed could make the most money. My grandfather started Walker Manufacturing in a small garage with one welding machine. Over 40 years, he turned it into an $18 million family business. People in our town respected my grandfather. They respected my father. And one day, everyone assumed they would respect my older brother, Ryan. No one ever mentioned my name. Not because I was lazy. Not because I wasn't capable. But because my father had already decided who his favorite son was. Ryan. If Ryan closed one small sales deal, Dad threw a party. When I redesigned one of the company's production systems and saved thousands of dollars, Dad looked at me and said, "Good, that's what employees are supposed to do." Employees. Not son. That single word stayed with me for years. I kept telling myself, if I work harder, maybe one day he'll finally see me. I was wrong. Because some people don't judge you by what you achieve. They judge you by the story they've already written about you. And in my father's story, Ryan was always the hero. I was just the extra character. I had no idea that the biggest humiliation of my life was only a few days away. 3 days later, every employee in the company gathered for the annual board meeting. I thought I was walking into the biggest opportunity of my life. I had no idea. I was about to walk into the moment that would change my future forever. 3 days later, every executive, every department manager, every employee was gathered inside the company's main conference hall. This wasn't an ordinary meeting. Rumors had been spreading for weeks. Everyone believed Dad was finally going to announce who would one day lead Walker Manufacturing. I straightened my tie and took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I actually felt hopeful. Over the last 4 years, I had modernized our inventory system, negotiated new supplier contracts, reduced production costs, and helped land the company's biggest client. I wasn't expecting a celebration. I just wanted my father to acknowledge my work. Dad stepped onto the stage. The room erupted in applause. He smiled confidently. Today is one of the most important days in our company's history. The room fell silent. He continued. I've decided who will become the next executive vice president and eventually lead this company. My heart pounded. I glanced at Ryan. He looked completely relaxed. Almost as if he already knew the answer. Dad opened a black folder. Then he smiled. I'm proud to announce Ryan Walker. The room exploded with applause. People stood up. Some even cheered. Ryan walked onto the stage with a confident grin. Dad hugged him. Then placed a small velvet box in his hand. Inside was Grandpa's original gold company pin. The symbol of leadership. The symbol I had dreamed about since I was a child. I swallowed hard. Maybe this was still okay. Maybe Dad would recognize my contribution too. Then he looked directly at me. In fact, I want Ethan to stand up. Every eye in the room turned toward me. I slowly stood. Dad smiled. Not with pride. With judgment. Ethan is a good worker. A few people nodded politely. But running a company takes more than hard work. He paused. It takes leadership. Then he said the words that would echo in my mind for the next 10 years. You'll never be a businessman. Another pause. You're simply not leadership material. The room became painfully quiet. No one clapped. No one spoke. I looked around. Some employees lowered their eyes. Others looked uncomfortable. Ryan just smiled. Dad finished with one final sentence. From today forward, Ethan will report directly to Ryan. At that moment, I realized something. This meeting had never been about announcing the company's future. It had been about humiliating me. In front of everyone, I quietly picked up my laptop, walked toward the exit. Just as my hand touched the door, my father called out one last time. Don't worry, Ethan. You'll always have a place here. As long as you're willing to work for your brother. I stopped walking. But I didn't turn around. Because in that moment, I had already made the biggest decision of my life. The conference room was so quiet. You could hear the air conditioner humming. My father's final words echoed in my head. You'll always have a place here, as long as you're willing to work for your brother. I stood there for a few seconds. Then I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because something inside me had finally broken. I turned around slowly. For the first time in my life, I looked my father straight in the eyes. I spent 10 years trying to earn your respect. The room was silent. I thought if I worked harder, if I sacrificed more. The conference room was so quiet. You could hear the air conditioner humming. My father's final words echoed in my head. You'll always have a place here, as long as you're. I thought if I worked harder, if I sacrificed more, if I solved enough problems, you'd finally see me as your son. I paused. I was wrong. My father crossed his arms. If you're finished being dramatic, go congratulate your brother. Ryan smirked. Don't take it personally, Ethan. The company just needs a real leader. Several employees looked away. They knew this wasn't right. But no one spoke. I closed my laptop, placed my employee ID badge on the conference table. Then I removed the company keys from my pocket. I set them beside the badge. My father frowned. What are you doing? I answered calmly. I'm making your decision easier. Ryan laughed. What does that mean? I looked at both of them. It means I quit. The room froze. One manager actually stood up from his chair. Wait, you're resigning? I nodded. Effective immediately. Dad laughed. You'll be back. No one walks away from a company like this. I picked up my backpack. It was the same backpack I'd carried every day for years. Inside, a laptop, a notebook, a charger, and the business ideas I'd been secretly working on every night after everyone else went home. As I reached the door, Dad said one last thing. Without this company, you'll be nothing. I stopped, still facing the door. Then I answered without looking back. We'll find out. I walked out of Walker Manufacturing. Not with a promotion. Not with an inheritance. Not with a single dollar. Just one backpack. One laptop. And a promise to myself. One day, I'd build something no one could take away from me. For the next several weeks, reality hit hard. Job applications. Rejection emails. Bills. Long nights wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Some mornings, I questioned everything. Then one evening, an email appeared in my inbox. Subject, we'd like to meet you. It wasn't from a giant corporation. For the next several weeks, reality hit hard. Job applications. Rejection emails. Bills. Long nights wondering if I'd made the biggest mistake of my life. Some mornings, I questioned everything. Then one evening, an email appeared in my inbox. Subject, we'd like to meet you. It wasn't from a giant corporation. It was from a tiny software startup with only 9 employees. I almost ignored it. I had no idea. That one interview would completely change my future. The next morning, I walked into that small office, completely unaware that the person waiting to interview me would become the mentor who changed my life forever. For 3 weeks, I lived off my savings. Every morning started the same way. Coffee. Laptop. Another dozen job applications. Another dozen rejections. The words became painfully familiar. We've decided to move forward with another candidate. One afternoon, an email arrived from a small software startup called Nova Core Solutions. 9 employees. 1 rented office. No famous clients. No impressive reputation. I almost deleted it. But something told me, go. The next morning, I walked into their tiny office. There was no marble lobby. No receptionist. Just a small waiting area and the smell of fresh coffee. A man in his 60s was struggling to carry several heavy boxes toward a storage room. Without thinking, I put my backpack down. Let me help you. He smiled. You don't work here. I know. But you still need help. Together we carried the boxes. When we finished, he simply thanked me and walked away. I never asked who he was. 10 minutes later, a young woman invited me into the interview room. She looked over my resume. You spent 6 years helping build Walker Manufacturing. Why did you leave? I could have told her everything. The humiliation. The favoritism. The betrayal. Instead, I smiled. I wanted to build something where ideas matter more than last names. She looked impressed. Then she pushed a laptop toward me. We're losing customers because our inventory software keeps failing. Show me how you'd fix it. For nearly an hour, I forgot it was an interview. I drew diagrams, wrote code, explained solutions. When I finished, the room was silent. Then someone started clapping. I turned around. It was the same older man I'd helped with the boxes. He walked into the room smiling. The interviewer stood up. Ethan, I'd like you to meet Michael Grant, our founder. I froze. The founder? Michael laughed. You didn't know who I was. And you helped me anyway. He pulled out a chair and sat across from me. Do you know what your biggest strength is? I shook my head. You solve problems. But more importantly, you treat people with respect before you know what they can do for you. He leaned forward. I can teach someone business. I can't teach character. Then he extended his hand. Welcome to Nova Core Solutions. For the first time since leaving my family's company, someone believed in me. Not because of my last name. Not because of my father. Because of me. I thought my life was finally moving forward. I had no idea. Someone from my past had already discovered where I worked. Late that evening, Michael received an anonymous email. The subject line read, Do not trust Ethan Walker. Attached were documents designed to destroy my reputation before I had even started my new job. The next morning, I walked into NovaCore expecting my first real day at work. Instead, Michael Grant was already waiting for me. He held up a printed email. The subject line read, Do not trust Ethan Walker. I recognized the sender immediately. There was no name. But I knew exactly who had sent it. Ryan. Michael looked at me calmly. Were you planning to tell me about this? I took a deep breath. No. He raised an eyebrow. Why not? Because I didn't want my past to become your problem. For a few seconds, he simply stared at me. Then, he smiled. You know what I noticed yesterday? I looked confused. You never blamed anyone. You could have spent the entire interview complaining about your family. But you didn't. He slowly tore the anonymous email in half. Then again. And again. Until it landed in the trash. I hire people. Not rumors. At that moment, I knew I'd made the right decision. The next 2 years were the hardest years of my life. I was always the first person in the office. Usually around 6 a.m. Most nights. I left after everyone else. Sometimes. Past midnight. I wasn't chasing money. I was chasing something I'd never had. Belief. Every project became another chance to prove. Not to my father. But to myself. That I belonged. One Friday afternoon. Michael called me into his office. He placed a thick folder on the desk. Open it. Inside was a contract. I frowned. What is this? Michael smiled. I've been watching you. You don't think like an employee anymore. You think like an owner. He slid a pen across the table. I want to offer you 10% ownership of Novacor. I stared at him in disbelief. I can't afford this. He shook his head. I know. So you'll earn it. Stay with us. Help us build this company. And that ownership becomes yours. For a moment, I couldn't speak. No one in my own family had ever trusted me with responsibility. Now, a man I'd known for only 2 years was trusting me with part of his company. I signed the agreement with shaking hands. I had no idea that this single signature would change my future forever. 3 years later, Novacor wasn't a tiny startup anymore. We had over 200 employees, clients across the country, and investors were offering millions to buy us. One business magazine called us the fastest growing software company in the Midwest. The article included a photo of me. I smiled and closed the magazine. I didn't know that across town, someone else was staring at that same cover. Ryan. And the look on his face wasn't pride. It was fear. Ryan slowly picked up his phone. He looked at my picture on the magazine cover. Then whispered, Dad, we have a problem. Ryan slowly lowered the magazine. His hands were shaking. On the cover, there I was, standing in front of Novacor's new headquarters. The headline read, Local startup reaches a $120 million valuation. Ryan grabbed his phone. Dad. We have a problem. Across town. Walker Manufacturing wasn't the company I'd left 6 years earlier. The parking lot was half empty. Machines sat idle. Longtime employees had quietly resigned. Several of the company's biggest customers had switched to competitors. Inside the boardroom, my father slammed a financial report onto the table. How did we lose another $12 million contract? No one answered. Ryan cleared his throat. The client said our technology is outdated. Dad frowned. Then upgrade it. The chief financial officer spoke quietly. We can't. Dad looked confused. What do you mean we can't? The bank rejected our loan application. Silence. For the first time. My father looked worried, meanwhile. Novacor was celebrating. The office buzzed with excitement. Employees applauded as Michael Grant stepped onto the stage. I have an announcement. He smiled. When Ethan joined this company, we had 9 employees. Today, we have more than 500. The room erupted in applause. Michael turned toward me. And that's why I'm officially naming Ethan Walker Chief Executive Officer of Nova Core Solutions. I froze. The room stood to its feet. People cheered. Some wiped away tears. Michael handed me the company's original founder's notebook. I've built this company, he said with a smile. Now it's your turn to lead it. For a moment, I couldn't speak. 6 years ago, my father said I'd never be leadership material. Now, hundreds of people were trusting me to lead them. That evening, as I sat alone in my new office, my assistant knocked gently. Mr. Walker, you have a visitor. I don't have any meetings. I know. She hesitated. He says he's family. My heart skipped. Family? I walked into the lobby. Standing there, wearing an expensive suit but looking completely exhausted, was Ryan. The same brother who had smiled the day my father humiliated me. He looked at me, then quietly said, Ethan, we need your help. I looked at Ryan for several seconds. Then I asked one simple question. Is this the first time you've come to see me? I paused. Or the last option you had left? Ryan lowered his head. He couldn't answer. Ryan stood in the middle of Nova Core's lobby. For the first time in his life, he didn't look confident. He looked defeated. The expensive suit was still there, but the arrogance wasn't. I folded my arms. You said you needed my help. He nodded. I do. I looked at my assistant. Cancel my next meeting. She quietly closed the conference room door behind us. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Finally, Ryan broke the silence. Dad doesn't know I'm here. I wasn't surprised. He'd never let you ask me for help. Ryan slowly shook his head. No. He doesn't even know how bad things really are. I leaned back. So tell me. Ryan took a deep breath. We're losing money every month. Our biggest customers are leaving. The bank froze our credit. The suppliers want payment up front. I listened without saying a word. Then came the sentence I never expected to hear. We're 90 days away from shutting down. The room fell silent. Walker Manufacturing, the company my grandfather built with his own hands, was dying. Not because of one bad year. Because of years of bad decisions. Ryan looked at me. I know you hate me. I know I don't deserve your time. But this company isn't just ours. It belongs to more than 400 employees. Families depend on those paychecks. That sentence hit me harder than I expected. I wasn't thinking about my father anymore. I was thinking about welders, receptionists, machine operators, people who had always treated me with respect, people who had nothing to do with my family's mistakes. I looked Ryan in the eyes. If I help, it won't be to save your reputation. It won't be to protect Dad. It'll be because innocent people shouldn't lose their jobs. Ryan nodded slowly. I understand. Just then, my assistant rushed into the room. Mr. Walker, you need to see this. She placed a tablet on the table. The local business news flashed across the screen. Breaking news. Walker Manufacturing misses major loan payment. Bankruptcy rumors spread. Ryan's face turned white. My God. Before either of us could speak, my phone rang. The caller ID read, Dad. For 6 years. He had never called me once. Now. He was calling 3 times in a row. I let it ring. Then. A text message appeared. Ethan, please. This is bigger than our family. I stared at the screen. For the first time. The man who once told me I'd never be a leader was asking me to become one. I slowly picked up the phone. Pressed answer. And before I could say a single word, my father whispered something that made my heart stop. Your grandfather left you one more secret. I slowly answered the phone. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then my father whispered, Your grandfather left you one more secret. I frowned. What secret? His voice sounded tired. Not over the phone. I need to see you. I looked through the conference room window. Ryan was watching me nervously. For 6 years. My father had never called. Never apologized. Never asked how I was. Now. He wanted to meet. I finally answered. 1 hour. Your office. Then I hung up. Ryan looked at me. What did he say? I picked up my jacket. He says Grandpa left one more secret. Ryan's face changed instantly. He never told me anything about another secret. I looked at him carefully. I believe you. For the first time. I actually did. An hour later. I walked back into Walker Manufacturing. Nothing had changed. The same old logo. The same smell of steel and machine oil. The same hallway where I used to arrive before sunrise. But something felt different. The building no longer felt powerful. It felt empty. Employees walked quietly. Nobody smiled. Some machines weren't even running. The company was slowly dying. Dad was waiting alone in the boardroom. He looked older. His hair had turned almost completely gray. The man who once commanded every room now looked exhausted. He stood as I entered. Ethan, I nodded politely. You said Grandpa left another secret. Without saying a word. He placed an old wooden box on the table. I recognized it immediately. It had always been in Grandpa's office. As kids, Ryan and I were never allowed to touch it. Dad slid it toward me. He told me to give this to you only when I realized what kind of man you had become. I stared at him. So why didn't you? He lowered his eyes. Because I was stubborn. I thought I was protecting the company. The truth is, I was protecting my own pride. I slowly opened the box. Inside, there were old photographs, letters, a leather notebook, and one sealed envelope. Across the front, in Grandpa's handwriting, were the words, For Ethan, open only when your father finally learns the difference between success and character. My hands froze. I looked at my father. Tears filled his eyes. He was right. I spent my whole life building a business. And almost destroyed my family. I carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter. But before I could read the first line, the boardroom doors burst open. The company's lawyer rushed inside, breathing heavily. Mr. Walker. We have a serious problem. Everyone stood. What happened? Dad asked. The lawyer looked directly at me. Our largest competitor has just made an offer to buy Walker Manufacturing. He paused. And if the deal goes through by tomorrow morning, your grandfather's company will disappear forever. The room fell completely silent. I looked down at Grandpa's unopened letter. Then back at the lawyer. For the first time, I realized I wasn't deciding whether to help my family. I was deciding whether my grandfather's legacy would survive. The room went completely silent. No one moved. No one spoke. The lawyer slowly placed a thick folder on the conference table. Our competitor has offered to buy Walker Manufacturing. They'll keep the patents, the machinery, the customer contracts. He paused. But they'll close this factory within 6 months. My father slowly sat down. What about the employees? The lawyer looked away. They'll lose their jobs. Ryan buried his face in his hands. 400 families would lose everything. I looked around the boardroom. This was the same room where my father had once stood in front of everyone and declared, "You'll never be leadership material." Life had a strange way of changing people. Now, every eye in the room was on me. Waiting. Hoping. My father finally broke the silence. "Ethan. I know I don't deserve your help. I know I failed you. But please, don't let your grandfather's company disappear because of my mistakes." It was the first time I had ever heard him admit he was wrong. I took a slow breath. Then I asked the only question that mattered. "How much debt?" The chief financial officer answered quietly. $38 million. The number hit the room like thunder. Ryan whispered. "We tried everything. New investors. New banks. No one believes we'll survive." I nodded. "I understand why." They looked confused. I stood and walked toward the large whiteboard. Without saying a word, I wrote 3 sentences. Cut unnecessary divisions. Modernize production. Earn customer trust back. Then I turned toward the board. The company isn't dying because of one bad year. It's dying because everyone kept protecting their egos instead of fixing the problems. No one argued. Because everyone knew it was true. I closed the marker. "I'll consider helping." Hope returned to my father's face. "But I have conditions." "What conditions?" Ryan asked. I looked directly at him. Condition 1. I don't work for Walker Manufacturing. If I come back, it'll be as an independent advisor. He nodded immediately. Done. Condition 2. No one in this family gets special treatment. If someone makes a bad decision, they're held accountable. Dad quietly replied. Agreed. I took one final breath. And condition 3. I looked straight into my father's eyes. If I discover that anyone has hidden the truth from me again, I walk away. Forever. The room fell silent. My father slowly nodded. You have my word. Just then, the lawyer's phone rang. He answered. His face turned pale. He slowly lowered the phone. They've changed the offer. Everyone stared at him. The competitor won't wait until tomorrow. He swallowed hard. They're sending representatives. In 1 hour, I looked out through the boardroom window, watching the employees working on the factory floor, completely unaware that within the next hour, their future would be decided. And for the second time in my life, every decision in that building rested on my shoulders. The boardroom clock ticked loudly. 58 minutes. That was all we had before Walker Manufacturing would either survive or disappear forever. Outside, hundreds of employees continued working. None of them knew that lawyers were already driving toward the factory. My father looked at me. Ethan, what do we do? For years, I had dreamed about hearing those words. Not because I wanted power, but because I wanted to be trusted. I stood up. We're not waiting for them. Everyone looked confused. What do you mean? Ryan asked. I buttoned my jacket. We're going to meet them first. 30 minutes later. 3 black luxury SUVs rolled into the factory parking lot. The executives from Titan Industrial Group stepped out. Their CEO, Richard Lawson, a man famous for buying struggling companies, then shutting them down. He smiled as he walked into the boardroom. Mr. Walker, I'm sorry we had to meet under these circumstances. My father forced a smile. Richard placed a thick contract on the table. This offer expires today. It's generous. It's also your only option. No one reached for the papers. Instead, I quietly slid another folder across the table. Richard looked at me. And you are? I smiled politely. Ethan Walker. His expression changed. The CEO of Nova Core Solutions? I've read about you. I nodded. Good. Then you already know I don't like wasting time. Richard leaned back confidently. So, are you here to say goodbye to your family business? I looked him straight in the eyes. No. I'm here to make you a different offer. The room froze. Richard laughed. You think you can outbid Titan Industrial? I calmly opened my folder. No. I'm not buying Walker Manufacturing. Confused silence. I'm proposing a strategic partnership. Richard's smile disappeared. I continued. Walker Manufacturing has world-class production facilities. NovaCore has advanced manufacturing software and automation technology. Separate. We're both vulnerable. Together, we become stronger. Even Richard stopped smiling. For the first time. He wasn't negotiating. He was listening. Then he asked the question everyone feared. And what if I refuse? I leaned forward. Then tomorrow morning, NovaCore announces that every one of our future manufacturing contracts will go to your biggest competitor. The room went completely silent. Richard stared at me. He knew I wasn't bluffing. NovaCore's contracts were worth millions. Losing them would cost Titan far more than this acquisition could earn. For nearly a minute, no one spoke. Finally, Richard closed his contract. He stood up, then extended his hand. I believe we should continue this conversation. My father looked at me in disbelief. Ryan couldn't speak. The employees outside had no idea that the company they thought was about to die had just been given a second chance. As Richard prepared to leave, he turned back toward me and quietly said, Mr. Walker, before I sign anything, there's something about your grandfather you deserve to know. My heart skipped. What do you mean? Richard took a slow breath. Your grandfather once saved my father's business. And I've spent 25 years waiting for the chance to repay that debt. Richard Lawson remained standing at the door. No one said a word. Then he turned toward me. Your grandfather once saved my father's business. And I've spent 25 years waiting for the chance to repay that debt. The room fell silent. I looked at him in confusion. My grandfather never told me that. Richard smiled sadly. He wouldn't. He never helped people so they would owe him. He slowly placed an old leather folder on the conference table. My father asked me to give this to you the day I met you. I never imagined we'd meet like this. I opened the folder. Inside, there was a faded newspaper clipping. The headline read, Local factory owner saves rival company from closure. The photograph showed 2 young businessmen shaking hands. One was Richard's father. The other, my grandfather. Richard spoke quietly. 30 years ago, My father was one signature away from bankruptcy. Every bank rejected him. Every investor walked away. Then your grandfather mortgaged his own house to guarantee my father's loan. My father looked stunned. You never told me that. Richard nodded. He didn't want anyone to know. He said, real leadership isn't about defeating people. It's about giving them another chance to stand on their own. Those words echoed through the room. For the first time, I understood why Grandpa had built respect wherever he went. People didn't admire him because he was wealthy. They admired him because he was generous. Richard looked directly at me. That's why I'm withdrawing the acquisition. The room froze. Ryan looked up in disbelief. What? Richard smiled. I'm not buying Walker Manufacturing. I'm investing in its future. He slid a new agreement across the table. A strategic partnership. NovaCore provides technology. Titan provides capital. Walker Manufacturing keeps its name. The employees keep their jobs. For several seconds, nobody moved. My father slowly removed his glasses. Tears rolled down his face. I don't deserve this. Richard answered calmly. No. But your father did. Just as everyone began to breathe again, the company's chief financial officer rushed into the room. He looked terrified. Mr. Walker. We have another problem. What now? Dad asked. The internal audit is finished. He placed a report on the table. There are nearly $9 million in missing company funds. The room went silent. Ryan immediately stood. That's impossible. The CFO slowly turned another page. It isn't. The money disappeared over the last 5 years. My father frowned. Who approved those payments? The CFO swallowed hard. Then pointed to a single signature. Everyone looked down. It wasn't my father's. It wasn't mine. It wasn't Richard's. It was Ryan Walker. Ryan's face lost all color. He whispered, I can explain. I looked at my brother. The same brother who had once called himself the future of the company. Then I quietly asked, Ryan, what exactly did you do? He didn't answer. Because for the first time in his life, there was nowhere left to run. Ryan's face turned completely pale. The conference room was silent. No one moved. The chief financial officer slowly pushed the audit report across the table. There are $9 million in unauthorized payments. My father grabbed the report with trembling hands. Page after page. Every transaction carried the same approval code. Ryan Walker. Dad looked up. Tell me this isn't true. Ryan swallowed hard. It's not what it looks like. I folded my arms. Then explain it. For the first time in years, Ryan had no clever answer. The CFO opened another folder. We traced every payment. Some went to shell companies. Some paid for luxury properties, private travel, luxury vehicles, and several consulting firms that don't actually exist. The room froze. Dad slammed his fist onto the table. You stole from your own company? Ryan shouted. I was trying to keep us alive. No. The CFO interrupted. The company received almost none of this money. My father's voice cracked. I trusted you. I gave you everything. Ryan looked down. I know. Then the company's attorney spoke. Mr. Walker. There's something else. He connected his laptop to the conference room screen. Security footage appeared. It showed Ryan entering the accounting office late at night. Another clip. Ryan removing financial records from a cabinet. Then another. Ryan instructing an employee to change invoice numbers. The attorney paused the video. The employee has already given a sworn statement. He admitted he changed the records. Because Ryan ordered him to. Ryan closed his eyes. His shoulders dropped. The confident man who had once stood on stage accepting the company pin was gone. Only a frightened man remained. My father slowly stood. His voice was barely above a whisper. Why? Ryan finally looked up. For the first time. There was no arrogance. Only regret. I wanted you to be proud of me. I thought if the company looked successful, you'd finally believe I deserved to lead it. Tears filled his eyes. So every time we lost money, I hid it. Every bad decision, I covered it with another lie. And eventually, I couldn't stop. No one spoke. Because the truth was more painful than anyone expected. My father removed the gold company pin from Ryan's jacket. The same pin he had proudly handed him years ago. He placed it gently on the conference table. Then he looked at me. Ethan. I chose the wrong son to lead this company. The room fell completely silent. I took a slow breath. Dad. This isn't about choosing one son over another. It's about choosing what's right. He lowered his head. For the first time in my life. He nodded. I finally understand. Just as the meeting seemed to be over, Richard Lawson's phone rang. He answered. His expression changed immediately. He looked directly at me. Ethan. The federal investigators are downstairs. They've received the audit report. They're asking for Ryan Walker. Ryan closed his eyes. He didn't try to run. He didn't argue. He quietly stood up. Knowing the consequences of his choices had finally caught up with him. End of chapter 12, cliffhanger. As investigators entered the building, my father turned toward me with tears in his eyes and whispered, if your grandfather were standing here today, would he still forgive us? I looked at Grandpa's old company pin lying on the table. But before I could answer, the boardroom door opened one more time. A receptionist stepped inside and said, Mr. Walker, there's someone here who says this company belongs to Ethan. The boardroom door slowly opened. A receptionist stepped inside. Mr. Walker. There's someone here asking for Ethan. I frowned. Who is it? She looked down at her notes. He says he worked for your grandfather. The room fell silent. My father looked confused. That's impossible. I know every senior employee. The receptionist shook her head. He said he never worked for the company. He worked for your grandfather. A few moments later, an elderly man in his late 70s walked into the room. His navy suit was old but perfectly pressed. His hands showed years of hard work. He looked directly at me. You must be Ethan. I nodded. I'm Samuel Harris. I was your grandfather's closest friend. My father's eyes widened. Uncle Sam? The old man smiled sadly. It's been a long time. Samuel slowly placed a worn leather journal on the conference table. I promised your grandfather I'd only give this to Ethan. When the family finally learned the truth, I carefully opened the journal. Every page was handwritten. Business ideas. Personal notes. Dreams for the company's future. Then I reached the final pages. Across the top, Grandpa had written, "The leader I believe in." My heart began to race. Below the title, there was only one name. Ethan Walker. My father covered his mouth. No. Samuel nodded. Your father chose Ryan. But your grandfather. He chose Ethan. The room fell completely silent. Samuel turned another page. Attached was a signed letter. I've watched both of my grandsons grow. Ryan has confidence. But Ethan has character. A business can survive bad markets. It cannot survive bad character. Tears filled my father's eyes. I never knew. Samuel looked at him. You never wanted to know. You spent years looking for someone who would agree with you. Your father spent years looking for someone who would protect the people who worked here. No one argued. Because everyone knew he was right, then Samuel reached into his briefcase. He removed a small wooden box. Inside was Grandpa's original company watch. The watch he wore every single day. Samuel handed it to me. He wanted the next leader. To earn this. I stared at the watch in silence. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't covered in gold. But to me, it meant more than any title ever could, just then. The company lawyer received an urgent phone call. He answered. Then his face turned white. He slowly lowered the phone. Ethan. There's one last problem. What happened? The bank has frozen every company account. If we don't secure emergency funding, payroll won't go out on Friday. 400 families could miss their paychecks. Everyone looked at me. Not because I was the richest man in the room. But because, for the first time, they believed I was the leader. I looked at the payroll report. Then at Grandpa's watch in my hand. Finally, I said, call every employee to the factory floor. My father looked confused. What are you going to do? I looked out through the boardroom window and replied. It's time they heard the truth. And it's time they heard it from me. Within 20 minutes, every employee gathered on the factory floor. Machine operators, engineers, receptionists, forklift drivers. Some had worked there for 30 years. Others had just started. None of them knew the truth. They only knew one thing. Rumors of bankruptcy were everywhere. The room buzzed with nervous whispers. My father stood beside me. For the first time in my life. He didn't walk to the microphone. Instead, he handed it to me. I should have done this years ago. I looked at him. Then stepped forward. The room slowly became silent. I took a deep breath. My name is Ethan Walker. Most of you know me. Some of you watched me grow up in this factory. A few employees smiled. Others nodded. I wish I were standing here with better news. The company is facing the biggest crisis in its history. A wave of silence spread across the room. But I refuse to lie to you. We have serious financial problems. And some painful mistakes were made. No one interrupted. Because everyone could hear the honesty in my voice. Then I looked across the crowd. I also know something else. This company isn't just steel. It isn't machines. It isn't buildings. It's the people standing in front of me. Several employees wiped tears from their eyes. One elderly welder slowly removed his cap. I continued. My grandfather used to say, a company can always rebuild its buildings. But once it loses its people, it loses its soul. I paused. So today, I want to make you one promise. If you choose to fight for this company, I'll fight beside you. I'm not here to rescue one family. I'm here to protect 400 families. The factory exploded into applause. People stood. Some were crying. Others hugged one another. My father quietly wiped tears from his face. For the first time, he wasn't watching a son he underestimated. He was watching a leader. Just then, the factory doors opened. Richard Lawson walked in, followed by the executives from Titan Industrial. Everyone became silent again. Richard stepped onto the stage. I've spent 30 years negotiating business deals. But today, I'm making a different kind of investment. He turned toward the employees. Titan Industrial will invest in Walker Manufacturing. We're not closing this factory. We're expanding it. The room erupted. People shouted. Some fell to their knees in relief. Others clapped until their hands hurt. Then Richard smiled at me. Ethan Walker. This company deserves a leader who earns respect, not one who demands it. He extended his hand. I shook it. The cameras flashed. It wasn't just a business deal. It was the beginning of a new chapter. As everyone celebrated. A security guard rushed toward the stage. Mr. Walker. We've just received a court order. The celebration stopped instantly. The guard handed the envelope to me. I opened it. Read the first line. And my smile disappeared. The document began with 7 words. Notice of personal civil lawsuit against Ethan Walker. I looked at the signature. It was from Ryan Walker. After everything. My own brother had made one final move. The celebration ended instantly. The applause disappeared. Every employee stared at me. I looked down at the lawsuit. The signature at the bottom read, Ryan Walker. For a moment, I couldn't believe it. After everything. After the investigation. After admitting the truth. He was still trying to fight. My father slowly sank into a chair. No. Not again. Richard Lawson quietly asked. What is he claiming? The company attorney opened the documents. He read silently. Then looked up. A small smile appeared on his face. He handed the papers back to me. It's over. What do you mean? He isn't suing you. Everyone looked confused. The attorney pointed to the final page. Ryan wasn't demanding money. He wasn't asking for the company. He wasn't trying to stop the partnership. Instead, he had filed a legal statement accepting personal responsibility for every financial decision he had made. The document officially released the company, its employees, and me from any future legal claims connected to his actions. My father whispered. He protected us. The attorney nodded. For the first time. He told the truth. A few minutes later, Ryan entered the factory. Not in an expensive suit. Not surrounded by lawyers. Just wearing a simple jacket. The confidence that had once defined him was gone. He walked straight toward me. Then stopped. Ethan. I know I don't deserve forgiveness. I know I've spent years blaming everyone except myself. He took a deep breath. So today, I'm not asking for another chance. I'm asking you to stop carrying the anger I created. The room was silent. He reached into his pocket. Slowly. He placed Grandpa's original gold company pin in my hand. I never earned this. You did. For several seconds. Neither of us spoke. Then I closed my fingers around the pin. Not as a prize, but as a reminder. Leadership was never about winning against family. It was about protecting people. 3 months later, Walker Manufacturing reopened its newest production line.